Welcome back to another episode of Agsolutley Fabulous. It's episode 47. Today we're talking about, instead of backburning, using goats to clear debris.
It's worked in other places. And we're going to talk about how to save your family before it's tabloid news. Fingers crossed, succession planning. Get on it.
We hear from one of the Agfabs, Natasha, who has sent us a voice note. She attended the New South Wales Dairy Conference.
I'll be very disappointed if there wasn't a lot of cheese there. They're very disappointed, to be honest. And we're also going to talk about a debt recovery sale and trying to explain to those our listeners who might be from urban areas or aren't in the cattle game as to how and why this situation arose and why it's not the first time an Angus stud, not that I'm gloating or anything, has been forced into this position. I'm not actually gloating. It's terrible to see anyone go out of business, but yeah. And we'll have some questions and answers and talk about some stuff that our Agfabs have sent us this week.
Hi, welcome to Agsolutley Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together we are Agsolutley Fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode.
Absolutely. Before we jump into all of that, let's do some chit chat. Gillian, tell us about your week.
I'm home. Got home yesterday because I got home for a day, then had to take Eleanor up to school, up to Alice Springs, put her on the plane because she's in Sydney on camp at the moment, having the time of her life apparently. So I am at home for the next 4 days until Friday when we have to go up and pick her up off the plane on her way home. And getting ready to head off to the NFF conference the week after. So next week, be heading to the Gold Coast. Some of the Agfabs have already reached out to me and said that they're going to be there as well. So don't be shy. Make sure you come up and introduce yourself, and we'll take a selfie and we'll put it on the socials. And yeah, it's going to be exciting as. So what have you been up to, Katja? You're home too, finally?
Sort of.
No cattle trade?
It is that time of season. So we were just away at the Corindi show. Ned was judging 2 days of the cattle there. So they had 156 kids, 182 head of cattle, and on top of that, they had 82 steers. So Ned judged the junior judging, the steers, and then he also came back the next day to do paraders and just your normal cattle classes. So big effort on his half. So we were there. So he was judging from 12 o'clock on the Friday through till 6:30, and then the same, and then from 9 o'clock till I think it was 6:30 again the next day. So massive hours to go through all of that. And on the second day, he just took 10 minutes for lunch. Of course, I was there with all 4 kids. So we were doing the show things. We went to the petting zoo and the toy library was there. So we went and played with the toy library, and the kids played on the John Deere tractors. And we did all those sorts of things. They actually had this dinosaur exhibit where the kids, like, they paid to excavate an egg, and the egg was made out of plaster of Paris, and they got a little excavation tool, and so they had to find the egg in the sand, and then they had to excavate the dinosaur out of the egg, and they loved that. They were there for so long. And they also had a cowboy bubble man, which he just blew bubbles all day, and the kids loved it.
I don't think that's a big effort from Ned, and I don't think people appreciate how challenging it is to judge all breeds and all classes of cattle fairly and quickly, because there is a time thing. And 9 times out of 10, these are volunteers, or they just get their entry and their meals paid for. They're still volunteering all their time. And then you have to cop the backlash from the disgruntled exhibitors who didn't get a blue ribbon and those sorts of stuff. But without the judges, you couldn't have a show of any sort, because someone still needs to turn up and judge these things that you've spent, 2 or 3 years preparing to put them in there. So
absolutely. And for The Ultimate Farm Wife, season 9, episode 3 will be live by the time this is live. So that is with Sam Fryer. Sam Fryer has a podcast of his own. It's called A Place to Call Home. They do talk a lot about succession. So this interview is the raw side of Sam. It is not often that he gets on the opposite side of actually asking the questions. So really enlightening interview. If you like Place to Call Home, if you like The Ultimate Farm Wife, if you like this, you will also really enjoy listening to those stories. And Sam opens up about his family not only going through succession the first time and them, making the decision to leave the family partnership, but then he talks about, a few years later, everyone's in different headspace, we're all in a different economic climate, let's try and do that again. So great insights there with Sam, so jump across and have a listen to that.
And fun fact, I knew Sam when he was a little tiny boy from way back in Queensland. He's roughly the same age as some of my in-laws, who are now, they're all big grown men and ladies now, but yeah, he was at another small school and we were at another small school, and they used to get together and have these little small school events, and Sam was just a little tiny boy. Now look what he's doing.
Absolutely. He describes himself as a lovable rogue.
Yeah, that'd be about it. That'd be about right.
Absolutely love that. So let's jump into our first topics.
Goats.
The goats.
Using goats to do fire clearing, like fire break clearing, instead of using machinery, which in highly urbanized environments and very wooded areas, it's probably a really smart move to remove that underbrush and stuff with goats. And, I'm not a big fan of goats, to be completely honest, but they have their purpose and they will eat literally anything. Then they prefer, their browsers, not grazers, so they prefer to eat bushes. That's why they're really, really good at cleaning up blackberry bushes and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, but as long as they're not billy goats, I guess, because they're pretty rank.
Yeah,
if you've never smelt a billy goat, then I can't really describe it to you, but just imagine you take your goat's cheese that you buy at the supermarket and you leave it in the sun for a day in a sealed up container, and then open up the container and have a bit of a whiff. That'd probably be the best way to describe a billy goat, and still wouldn't even be close to how much they stink. But yeah, so can you imagine though, because where my dad was growing up in Western Queensland, this is a very common thing through Queensland, but there was no dairies because we didn't have the water or green grass to sort of really have a dairy cow like enterprise. So every family had at least a couple of goats, and goats just sort of roamed the town, and they send your child out in the evening to go and pen your own goat up, and you penned it up overnight, and then you'd milk it in the morning and then let it go again to graze. And that led to some very uncool environmental outcomes, and not to mention that they're goats and they jump on things and climb on things. So when cars came around, they were jumping all over people's very expensive automobiles down the main street and getting into people's verandas and all those sorts of things. So if you're going to use goats for scrub clearing, make sure you keep them contained.
I was absolutely going to say, as long as the fencing is on point, because on The Ultimate Farm Wife, way back when, I think it was season 2, I interviewed Sarah Cass, and she has goats. She uses them for their milk. She makes the most beautiful goat soap. It's what I use on Caroline. She has really bad eczema, but the goat soap is just beautiful. So we buy her goat soap. So I went down and interviewed her as like a homesteading side of The Ultimate Farm Wife, way back when it was called The Rural Mum. And her number one thing was, you need the right fencing. Do not even bother with goats if you do not have the fencing. And if you think it's high enough and you think it's reinforced enough, add more height, add more stability, because they will get through anything.
Yeah, goats are incredibly athletic and they are very, very smart. And you used to see back in the day, and this is probably would cause outrage from people who aren't familiar with goats and the safe tethering of animals. So in the old days, you usually just put a collar around your goat's neck and a bit of chain and a swivel, and then length of rope or a length of chain, and you put the stake in the ground, and the goat could just eat around in a circle. And he had plenty of swivels and stuff in there, so he wasn't going to twist himself up or anything like that. And I can just imagine some well-meaning person like, oh my God, that goat's on a chain. It shouldn't be on the chain. It's and then letting the goat go, and you'll never see your goat again, or it'll be on top of someone's car or something like that. And and I think it's important to note, though, that underbrush clearing and that sort of stuff with goats is a really good step forward and suitable in some areas. But in some areas, it doesn't beat a nice, big, wide, bare earth fire break.
Yeah,
and it's going to reduce the fuel load, but it won't remove it completely. And you see them, I don't see them a lot, but I see them on the internet a lot, that people have these small flocks of goats and they're leasing them out to people who've got really overgrown gardens, or they're putting them in electric tape and putting them in like road verges and those sorts of things to tidy up and that sort of stuff. They're great for that. Very multi-purpose animal is the goat, but does need expert handling, not for amateurs, which is funny given the number of hobby farmers that have goats. So,
yes.
And they wonder why their neighbours get annoyed.
And I do have a funny story about goats and on top of vehicles. So before I moved to the farm, I actually had a Land Cruiser. So I learned to drive in a Pajero. Then I upgraded to a Land Cruiser. And then when I moved to the farm and I was on farm with Ned, I downsized. So I downsized to a little Suzuki Swift just to get myself around. And I turned up to a shearing contract and I pulled up to the gate, opened the gate, drove through. That was all fine. I got out of the car and shut the gate. And when I turned back, I had 3 goats on my brand new Suzuki Swift car. Oh my goodness. And I didn't know whether to I was like, I don't want to scare them because I don't want them to slide and chip the paint, or if they already chipped it, or what do I do? Because I had never had goats before.
No, and you don't really, if you don't want to give them a fright and have them then piss and shit all over your car as well, because that's not pleasant either. We used to have a big billy goat, a big Sandan, so that big milking billy goat. And we also at the same time had a caravan that we weren't using at the time. So the billy goat decided that it was his house and he took up residence in there, and reek, it was so rotten. It was disgusting. But he decided to become very aggressive. And so he made his own decision. He determined that he wasn't a fit and proper goat to live with us anymore. So he went to goat Valhalla, or I guess he would go from being Swedish or something like that. So off he went. He was too naughty to stay.
Too naughty to stay. And then did you burn the caravan?
No, actually, we sent it up to a caravan specialist to have it refitted and turned it into our contracting van. I was horrified. I was absolutely convinced that it was going to reek like billy goat till the end of time. But the caravan man, I don't know what he thought when we rolled up with this dirty, stinking old van. We cleaned it off. We gave it a good hit with the pressure washer and that sort of stuff. But if you've ever had anything to do with goats, the smell really lingers. But we still have that van to this day, and it does not smell like billy goat. So I'll make the caravan refitter did a very, very good job.
So in summary, thank you, Agfabs, for sending this article through. Yes, in some circumstances, it will be beneficial. It is another method that you can use instead of backburning. But in other cases, it is still very much the case where backburning is still the best option, the cheapest option, and you don't have to chase down your goats if they do get out.
Yeah, and talk to your local CFS, because they will tell you what the best methodology is and the best way to go about clearing brush and all that sort of stuff, and what you do need to do to be prepared for fire season, because we do not want to see anyone's house burning down. We do not want to see any lives lost. So be prepared, make a plan, talk to your local CFS.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Topic 2. So saving your family before it ends up in the tabloids. So this was another Agfab article that was sent through. It's a book on succession planning, but basically what they're doing is they're ripping off Prince Harry. They've got him out in the paddock with some cattle and a book that he's holding about succession planning. Talk about it with your family before it ends up in the tabloids, before it explodes publicly, before any of this happens. Gillian, your take on it?
Yeah, look, we all know, well, I don't know if we all know, but the vast majority of us know the biggest mistake we make with succession planning is not talking about it early enough or often enough. And yes, it's quite easy to say that because it is a very complex thing, and there's so many different elements and factors tied up in it. And where you sit there and you talk about succession planning and you don't know what it's like, and I don't know what it is like for every family, but I do know that if you want to have a snowflake's chance in hell of maintaining your family, being able to sit down with each other at Christmas, Easter, whatever, not just come together for funerals. And I even know families who don't even do that. And also have an opportunity to maintain your farming enterprise and to carry that forward, you need to start talking early. How many times we said this, Katja? We can't get it. It is not a plan that is completely set in stone, because we all know things change. We need to be flexible to meet changing market conditions, land prices, all of these sorts of challenges that may come up in the future. But you need to start talking early, and you need to keep talking about it until you're never going to stop talking about it, because hopefully you'll then start with your next generation and the next generation, the next generation. Don't do it in your will. Don't spring it as a big surprise on everybody, and then expect everyone to just be happy and satisfied, because that is how things end up in newspapers, how they end up in court, how they end up tearing families apart. So talk early, talk often, get independent expert advice.
And if your family isn't talking about it, there are other steps that you can do independent of the family to set yourself up just in case it does go sideways. Get that third-party advice and start setting yourself up if they're not talking about it.
Yeah, because what I've found, once you start to force the issue, then they'll just clamp down even more.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's not great. So older generation, I really do hope you're listening to this and do take that on board. If you haven't started, start it now. Mm-hmm. Like, you should have done it 20 years ago, but you need to start now if you want to have any hope of maintaining any relationship with any of your children or grandchildren into the future. So yeah, that's a nice, happy note.
So Gillian, that takes us to the mid of our episode. And this part of the episode is sponsored by Farm Table. Table is a proud independent Australian agricultural knowledge platform bringing together the most relevant and curated agricultural resources from around the globe. More than that, Farm Table supports industry collaboration, peer-to-peer networking, and functions to build the capacity of individuals and organisations across the entire Australian ag supply chain. With over 3,000 resources, the latest agricultural events, funding opportunities, grants, micro courses and workshops, all in one location, Farm Table makes it easier to find the information you need.
So now we'll go from that into stupidity, because we've been sent another reel with people cuddling wild kangaroos, and my stomach drops every time I see it. Every time I hear of someone doing that to a wild animal, particularly kangaroos, they will split you from head to toe with their nails.
And I don't know how many times we have to say, they are not cute, cuddly creatures. They are vicious, wild animals. And I know they look cute and cuddly, and there's been plenty of cartoons made about them, and everyone goes, oh, kangaroos, oh, so lovely. Their front paws and claws are hard and thick and long. They're designed to dig up things in the hard Australian soil. So their claws, and they're filthy because they live in Australia in the dirt. There's botulism, Q fever, I don't know how many other sort of filthy diseases that these creatures carry around. Their teeth are actually very sharp, and they do bite quite frequently. The claws on their hind feet, and if you've ever seen them, they do have quite strong forearms. Do not engage or feed or touch or cuddle or, like the woman we saw, kiss on the face a dirty old feral kangaroo. And for me, it's worse because it's not just like a outback bush kangaroo. It's an urban kangaroo. So God knows what that thing has been eating and drinking and touching, and she's crouched down at eye level, and I was just like, don't do that. And anyone who's ever grown up with kangaroos would have had the same reaction. But what worries me is that there'd be another big cohort out there going, oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, she's so connected to nature. Oh, kangaroos are so lovely and sweet. Not the case. They're not lovely and sweet.
No, not wild kangaroos. If you go to a zoo or you go to somewhere where they're showing off, they're usually Western greys that they have in captivity. They're usually ones that they've hand raised since they were joeys. They still have the tendency to be able to hurt you, but they're used to being around people. They're used to being manhandled. Anything in the wild is not used to being like that. Please stop approaching them, touching them. We covered previous episodes that, they carry ticks and mites and all sorts of other things. So either yourself or your domestic dogs, anything like that can pick up lots of yucky things from kangaroos. Please stop approaching them. Please stop cuddling them. They're not.
And don't leave food out for them, because they can't. Their macropods are they're designed to eat a certain food ration, and that is nothing that you are going to have in your house, right? So don't start feeding them things from your pantry, because it will A, make them very sick, B, get them just quiet enough to be dangerous, and C, it will remove their fear of people and pets and put them in danger themselves, and probably D, make them a pest in the future, because if you ever leave or stop feeding them or something, they're going to still turn up, because they're creatures of habit, and they're going to wreck your garden, and they're going to wreck your neighbours' gardens, and you're going to be the most unpopular person in your neighbourhood. So please do not feed wild animals stuff from your home. It's a very bad idea.
Absolutely. So heading into topic 3, I am really loving that Agfabs who are at events that you and I can't make it to in the agricultural landscape are sending through voice notes. So you can either email those to me at the email address, it is in the show note, or you can send it to us on socials. I'm not sure how to download them from socials yet, but we'll work it out. Let's hear from Natasha.
So summary of the conference and my thoughts. The conference was amazing. It is the best bail up I've ever been to. We've had 7 now. The speakers were next level. The venue was amazing. The organisation and the running of everything just worked like clockwork. And so that makes the experience. And the women that come to these events are craving connection and storytelling and sharing and filling their cups. So we're all there for the same reasons. And that just adds to the vibe of the conference. So I just feel like I walked away with a full cup and so many inspirational thoughts and quotes and things, tools in my toolbox for dealing with, the hard days that are going to come, and connections with stronger connections with people I already knew, but building new connections with people I didn't know or hadn't met before. So, yeah, that's always the goal. It's the chats at morning and afternoon tea and midnight in someone's room and those connection times that just mean so much. So a big focus on our conference was onwards and upwards and looking to the future and how to future-proof our farms, but also us, because the most important thing on our farms is us. And so really upskilling ourselves so that we can be better farmers and make better decisions. When we're in a better head space and all of that, we can make better decisions and look forward and into the future and stuff. I think all of that makes us optimistic about the future. Definitely strong support networks. Like I just said, being really connected with other women is just such you can't put a dollar value on it, or you can't put it's hard to describe what that does for you and for your business. Actually get there. My favourite session probably be Bonnie Hancock, who was the fastest and youngest person to circumnavigate Australia in a ski kayak. And not only, she wasn't my favourite because of the amazing things that she's done, it was how she talked about the challenges and how she got through those really tough days that I related to so much, and her key take-home messages just resonated with me so much and so applicable to us on those really tough, challenging days on farm, completely different to being in the ocean surrounded by sharks and crocodiles. But yeah, so relatable also. A close second would be Flo McDonald, who spoke about her life growing up rurally and how becoming an author and writing has really helped her throughout her life. She was incredible and inspiring and all of the things as well. But yeah, it was just such an amazing conference. So many topics were covered. And yeah, it was just awesome. In terms of next year and who I would like to see, I had the incredible pleasure of being the speaker coordinator for this conference as part of our committee. So I had a fair bit of weigh in on the speakers this year, and a lot of them were who I really wanted to see. Yeah, I'm not sure who else. I'll definitely be doing some research over the coming months to find some amazing speakers for next year's conference. I suppose the challenge is when you have an amazing conference like that, you think, how can we make it better? How do we do it better? So yeah, lots of inspiring take-home messages, and yeah, there are so many amazing people out there that have a story to share. So it's about finding them and making the right vibe for the conference. I think that was one of the really good things with this year, is that the theme of onwards and upwards was really woven into all of the speakers, and every speaker got the memo of that, and that just made it so much more exciting. At other conferences, we've probably focused a little bit too much on the challenges rather than looking to the future, and this one we really wanted to really make it super inspiring and uplifting, and hence the theme of onwards and upwards, and just get everybody really inspired despite the challenges. You know, we still wake up every day and crawl out of bed and choose to milk our cows and choose to be dairy farmers. And so, you know, we need to be in a good headspace to deal with all of that, as all farmers do. And so, yeah, it was just really important to keep this one really upbeat, especially since the May floods. So I think we've done well, and lots of really good feedback from conference attendees, which was really exciting as well. So, yeah. So there's no date set for next year's conference, or no location yet. So with Baylor, we change it around all of the dairying regions within New South Wales, and we try and make it accessible for everybody. Yeah, I would love to, looking forward to hearing about what you share on Agfabs this week.
But the fact that our community is so engaged and like telling us about this sort of stuff, and not just us, because now they're telling all the listeners as well, that's excellent. So if you were going to an event, even if it's your local show or your CWE craft fair or something, give us a bit of a note, take a bit of a video with it, promote the volunteers who've put it together, give them a shout out, tag us in any of the pictures and that sort of stuff. If you see something that's a bit weird that you think we might have a bit of a giggle at, be sure to send a picture of that, because I'll tell you something, and I was so filthy I missed taking a photo of it because it was 130 kilometres an hour in the NT. Very common thing for me to see, haven't seen it for a while though, is our local Indigenous people still live very traditional lives. Pretty new Prado, bull bar, dead kangaroo wedged in the front of the bull bar, because why put it in the back where it's going to be all gross and get all blood through the back of a very nice car. Down the highway, 130 kilometres an hour. I see that. I have seen that like pretty frequently in the past, and I'm very disappointed I missed taking a picture of it for everyone.
Next time you must keep us updated, because that is something I have not seen.
It's a pretty unique, you might see it up the Cape or in Western Australia, but the Central Australian fellas, that's what they do. That's living their traditional lifestyle, eating their traditional foods at 130 kilometres an hour. That's the bit that gets me. Zooming down the highway, wedged in the bull bar.
So I was in high school when the movie Australia came out with Nicole Kidman, and we went to the cinemas. And so us country kids were sort of sitting in a group together, and then you had other people from town around us. And you could 100% tell in the opening scene when they shoot the kangaroo and stick it in the roof rack, you could tell who the country kids were because they all was like, of course they did that. But behind us, you could just hear the absolute shrieks of terror. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that.
Well, you don't want it in the car making a big mess. God, you've got to keep it on the outside. Leaks when you put a hole in it. You don't want that leaking all through your car.
My goodness. Excellent. So let's go into topic 4. So debit recovery sale, closing urban and rural divide on this article is what we wanted to make sure that we were covering when we covered this topic. So in this circumstance, it is a Angus stud, as Gillian said earlier. They have sold their stock for fantastic prices, but it did mean that they needed to go into dispersal because they did not pay their loans. They didn't pay what they owed, and they in this circumstance, Gillian, did they grow too fast, too big, or do you think it's a fallout from when the arse fell out of the market a couple of years ago and some of these bigger guys are only just foreclosing on their loans now?
I think I don't know the ins and outs of this particular enterprise's financial situation, and so I think we should just talk in general terms. This is the problem with agriculture and trying to produce a high value, low quantity item, so like stud stock. If the people you are selling to have no money, you can't make any money. I mean, yes, you can turn around and sell those things to the meatworks and those sorts of things, but then you're not going to realise the return on your very significant investment. And land prices also play a very significant part in this as well. So you go into a lot of debt usually to buy a suitable size piece of land to run your enterprise, and you do all your forward projections and calculations and those sorts of things. You think you're right, then it just takes a drought or a flood or a fire, or in a lot of cases in the past 3 years, we've had all three at once in different parts of Australia. People losing confidence in the market because they're not sure what's happening, so they're not going to buy new bulls this year. Which is, if someone goes, because you can keep your bulls around, they can go for a little bit longer, because you'd know, Katja, you breed them, and we sometimes buy them. So you just go, I can't really afford it this year because it's the first thing to go, because you've got a bull and he's doing the job.
Yeah.
So you just hang on to him for a couple more years, which then the people you buy the bulls off are like, well, what am I going to do with all these bulls now? Can't sell them as steers. Well, technically you can, but, cents on the dollar return. And I think sometimes people get a little bit overextended. They go into too much debt to buy land because the land value is so high. And then it doesn't take long to come along and upset that. Much the same as if house prices are exorbitant. And so you buy a house and you're just squeaking through. Then something happens in your life. You lose your job. The business you worked for goes bust. Your car breaks down. You need to buy a new one. It doesn't take long. And it doesn't take much to really set you back. And if you're living in this high value asset, like farmland is pretty high value, the banks are going to want their money back pretty smartish because there's a lot of demand for it. So they will sell you up. They have to go through a lot of different steps to do that. It's not the easiest thing. They'd prefer not to do it, but they can and they will. So, yeah, it's a challenge.
And I think that's a really important step for our audience to understand, is that they can't just decide to do that. There is lots of steps. There is lots of communication before it gets to this point. It's not something that should surprise them or come out of the blue. There is lots in the lead up to it.
And it is always better to be proactive. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this know very well, if you've got a loan of any sort, if you can't make that payment, talk to your bank as soon as possible, because they don't want to have to sell you up either. They would rather hold your hand and guide you through it to at least get you back to solvency, because the process of selling someone up is so complex. It costs them a heap of money. So, and it's bound up in so much legislation. Like, it's not the bad old days where banks could just roll up and say, pack your shit and get out. They're not allowed to do that anymore. It's so many different steps going towards this. And we do see this scenario happen quite a lot with high value producers of like, they're not a commodity anymore. So stud bulls, really exquisitely bred Wagyus, all these sorts of high value things that don't have a great big market. And then you've got your sunk cost fallacy. So I can't sell this cow for $1,000 because, she's actually worth $6,000. Well, mate, if you've got a bill that's $1,000, you need to sell that cow that's $1,000 because she can pay that bill. It doesn't matter what she's worth. And there's all these sorts of things. And then there's the emotional attachment to the animals, and you've spent so much time, and that's all your genetics, and you've worked your whole life to breed these things. And yeah, it's never an easy thing to see happen. And it could happen to just about anyone.
And you'll quite often find, not always, but quite often you'll find if someone is doing one high value item that they are selling in their production system on their farm, usually someone in that farming operation will be taking external income. So they'll be working off farm, or they will need to have another cash flow turnover in the meantime, because when they're breeding this stock, it can take, depending on what time you're selling them in your farming system, you can sell animals from quite young, but when you're wanting to get that big return on investment, you're looking at 18 months, 2 years on these animals. And that's a long time for an animal to be able to make that money back for you. You're putting a lot into it. It's taking up a lot of time. It's taking up a lot of space. So if you've got a high value animal like that, a lot of farming productions do have that quick turnover of a smaller animal or a smaller price that you're going to be rolling through to make sure that it's sustainable. And that's another thing that the government drought resilient programs are trying to get more and more farms and farmers to do. So you've heard Gillian and I talk about all the time how they want us to diversify and they want us to do more things off farm and go away from what we're doing. But this is another reason why, because it happens too often. It happens too often for those who are growing too fast or don't understand their numbers, or when there is something that's unexpected, but it is expected to happen and knocks people over.
Yeah. And in agriculture, cash flow is king sort of thing. So if you can demonstrate to the bank that you are consistently breeding and selling or growing and selling and cash flows, and you can pay your bills just about all the time, and you are not extending your overdraft too much, they will go, okay, we can see where you're at. We can see where you're going. We can see it's just seasonal. We can see it's a price issue, these sorts of things. You need to keep that cash flow. That's why people who breed just one thing, like one high value thing, often leave themselves very, very exposed to all these other risk factors because they don't have anything else to come along and pay their bills. You don't have to be, I'm going to breed these gold-plated Wagyu heifers or whatever. You can then get some normal old cows and at least breed some calves to make meatwork steers or whatever, or grow, or get a gisment stock, or grow a bit of a crop, or get a job in town, or something to keep that cash flow ticking along while you're waiting for the right circumstances and the right price for this very special thing that you are breeding or growing. So, yeah.
I do feel sorry for them. It is not a nice situation to be in. They will have to rebuild their life because it sounds like it was a pretty big event for them. So I wish them all the best, and I hope they take the time to reflect before they jump straight back into something.
Yeah, it is not something that I would like to go through. I can't even begin to imagine the stress and everything of it. And the stress it's placed their community under as well, because what happens is a lot of times everyone knows each other, the vendors know each other, and so you're going down to your local shop and you just put it on the account because they know you can't pay it, and then all of a sudden you go bankrupt, and then all your local shop, your local feed merchant, all these sorts of are left with bills that haven't been paid, and it's not a great way to have the community to have to carry that burden as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when they're just looking after you and when times are hard for them as well. That's a lot from them to bounce back from.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope we explained that. It is economics and those sorts of things. It is very hard to explain because I don't think agriculture is particularly unique, but it does have a lot of contributing factors. So it's very easy to look at something from the outside and go, oh, well, they're just running a jackaroo show. That's why they went broke. But there's so many little things, incremental things along the way that could have happened to sort of, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? If it had rained, if their clientele had not pulled back on buying bulls in the last 2 or 3 years when seasons were bad, all these sorts of things. Yeah. And some things you just, you can sort of plan for them, but you can't always account for them.
Yeah. And sometimes they just come at the wrong time.
Yep.
Too many things line up. But thank you guys for listening to another week. If you are listening to this, I will be at the Ugara show. I am helping judge the Young Women's Contest there. So I will be there on Friday judging and Ned will be there on the Saturday doing the cattle. So if you're around, come say hi.
What the Young Women's Contest? So is that like jams and shit or?
No, so that is actually, you might know that as what did it used to be called? Showgirl competition.
Okay. Yep. So deportment and all those sorts of things. And they have to make a little speech and stuff.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Very
Yeah.
nice. So
they should have to bake a cake or something as well, just to prove that they're a well-rounded individual. shear a sheep, bake a cake, change a baby's nappy, drive one-handed while feeding a potty lamb.
I'll report what they had to do, but most of the time it is etiquette and public speaking and confidence and knowledge. So but I look forward to reporting back on that.
No, that's good fun. We need people to participate in these country shows because they're the lifeblood of our communities in so many cases. And we need the next generation to come through. So yeah, good on you for judging it and good on the girls for having a crack.
Absolutely. And we'll talk to everyone in the next episode. If you're enjoying this, then please leave a 5-star review where you are listening. It does help others find us. And if you enjoy a video podcast, remember to check us out over on YouTube. Gillian laughs at that every single time.
Yes, if they're not used to me by now and the way I look and stuff. So yeah, not worth worrying about. But thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.